I am out here with the Eachine mini Cessna. This is courtesy of Banggood. I want to thank Banggood very much for sending this plane for review. I've been wanting to receive one of these for review since I first saw it in the pipeline. I've got my timer set for 5 minutes. We're going to launch it in beginner mode, fly it around a bit in beginner mode, and then we'll switch it into intermediate. And then on the second flight, we'll test it out in expert mode, which I hope is going to be full manual mode. Okay, so let's get it in the air. Alright, that is nice and stable, and it's faster than I thought it would be. Looks like you have to use a lot of rudder to get it to turn. I wondered about those ailerons. The ailerons are inboard on the main wing. But it is extremely stable. Faster than I thought it would be. Pretty sweet, huh? Okay, let's see what kind of elevator authority. That's pretty good elevator authority for beginner mode. Okay, let's see what kind of rudder authority we have. Okay, so there's full left rudder. There's full right rudder. I think it's got a little more rudder to the left than it does to the right. I may have to adjust that. But it will spin right around, just like the other Eachine planes that I've flown. That's pretty slick. Ooh, get a little bit of a breeze. It's not bad out here though. I'd say about 3 to 4. Alright, let's try that again. Whoa, I did a tip stall there. Did you see that? Let's try that again. Yeah. Oh, I lose it in the sun. It will do a tip stall. What I was doing was I was climbing full elevator and spinning it around with the rudder, kind of like a stall turn. And I did get a tip stall out of it both times. So be aware of that. Okay, so let's really spin it around to the right. That was a pretty good turn to the right. And if you're just using rudder, it'll keep the wing pretty level when you spin it around. And you do have to use quite a bit of rudder to spin it around. Alright, it's not, you can't just do a bank and yank. So it's like a lot of planes, a lot of traditional planes. You do need to use quite a bit of rudder to get a nice coordinated turn out of it. Oh, and you know what? I think I forgot to hit my timer. Oh, man. How many times have I done that? Okay. Now I got my timer going. I don't know how long I've had it in the air. Okay, so let's gain a little altitude and put it in intermediate mode. It looked like it wanted to climb a little bit right away when I put it in intermediate. Oh yeah. It's definitely a little bit trickier than the other planes I've flown in intermediate mode. For sure. Alright, let's get her to turn here. I had to put in full rudder there to get it to turn. And it's wanting to nose up on me a little bit. In intermediate mode. Kind of odd. Oh. Ah, you can do a loop with it. In intermediate gyro mode. Let's bring it back in here a little bit closer. In intermediate mode, I'm having to use more rudder than I did in beginner mode. But yeah, you can loop it. But the controls are more abrupt. I did set the controls up. So that they were the recommended linkage connections for intermediate mode. And it seems like the elevator is a bit abrupt in intermediate mode. Yeah, it is. So I'm sure it's going to be a bit abrupt in manual mode as well. But in intermediate mode, you need to use a little aileron and you need to use a little rudder to get a coordinated turn in intermediate mode, whereas in don't lose it in the sun. Whereas in beginner mode, ooh, see how abrupt that is with the elevator? So I'm definitely going to be changing the linkage on the elevator before I put it in manual mode. Okay, so I switched it back into beginner mode there. So I'm going to lose some altitude and bring it in and land it. And then I'm going to change that elevator linkage before I toss it back up in the air again, because that's just too abrupt for me. The rudder seemed fine, the aileron seemed fine, but the elevator has just got too much control authority in intermediate mode. And like I said, I'm sure it's going to have too much in manual mode. Okay, so let's bring it in from that direction. I'm completely off the throttle. I was completely off of the throttle there and just glided it in. So, not bad. I mean, the gyro in beginner mode is pretty rock solid. You can in beginner mode induce a tip stall. I did it twice, trying to do stall turns. where it would almost complete the stall turn, and then it would kind of roll. You know, it would tip stall and roll. So be aware of that. I'm going to go ahead and change the, well, I can't change the linkage on the elevator. I actually have it in the top hole right now, so that is as little movement as I can get on the elevator. There goes my timer. Without changing the linkage on the servo. So I will have to move that. I'll have to remove the control horn from the elevator servo and move the linkage to the inner hole, because I believe that those linkages at the servos are all on the outer arms of the servos. So when I get it back to the hangar, I'll make that adjustment before I bring it back out again. But so I didn't like the elevator authority on intermediate mode, and so I know I'm not going to like it in manual mode. But everything was nice in beginner mode. So anyway, I'm going to go ahead and put another battery pack in it, and then we'll gain some altitude, and I will put it in manual mode or expert mode just to see. I'll be back in a minute. Okay, flight number 2. Let me make sure I got my timer set this time. I'm going to launch it again in beginner mode. Okay, let's get it in the air. Boy, that thing takes off, doesn't it? I was probably throttling up about 70%, so I'm guessing 50 to 60 is going to be plenty for launch. Okay, so let's see how slowly we can fly it. That plane must really cut through the air very well. I'm flying around right now at about 50% throttle. Flying a lot of rudder, a lot of aileron in beginner mode. Watch out for the scrub. That's pretty slow. The gyro is doing an excellent job maintaining its attitude at very slow flight. So rock solid in beginner mode. Look at that slow turn. Yeah, so you can fly this plane pretty darn slow. I'm having a hard time backing out of the throttle enough. But very good slow flight capability. Oh, I stalled it right there. Did you see that? Got a little tip stall out of it. So I'd say 45 to 50% throttle is about as low as you want to go. But that's pretty slow. You can go, you need to make your turns a little shallow, of course. You will lose lift, and there's nothing the gyro can do about that, right? But pretty rock solid in beginner mode. Okay, so let's gain some altitude, and we'll put it in expert mode and see what it does. I'm a little iffy about doing this because that elevator is pretty twitchy, even in intermediate mode. Okay, so there's expert mode, and it wanted to put its nose up as soon as I switched in, and I had the elevator pretty neutral, in manual mode. Yeah, there's a stall. and I have maximum throw on the ailerons, but see how twitchy the elevator is? Yeah, I can't even roll it over. So not a lot of aileron authority. Okay, I'm back in beginner mode. I'm going to have to make some adjustments on this plane before doing much in manual mode. And currently it is, with the setup that it has right now, it is not capable of doing a roll, even in expert mode. We are going to have to rectify that situation. But I'm really impressed. I'm really impressed with the way it handles in beginner mode gyro. On almost every one of these gyro planes, the elevator has been too twitchy in intermediate mode and definitely too twitchy in expert mode. And this plane is the same. So, but I wanted to bring it out and do the first review flights with it in its recommended configuration, even though I knew that that elevator was probably going to be too twitchy. And there's my timer. But pretty rock solid in beginner mode. Alright, so let's bring it back around. We'll run another circuit and bring it in for a landing again. Alright, I'm completely off the throttle. I'm completely off the throttle. Ah! I needed a little throttle at the end on that one. But very impressive in beginner mode. Not so much in intermediate and expert mode at this point, but we will fix that. Alright, so what I will do is I will meet you back at the hangar, and I'll go over the specs, the assembly, how I have the plane set up stock, what adjustments I think I need to make before I bring it back out again. So I will see you back at the hangar. Okay, so that wasn't a bad couple of flights in the first outing. So let me go over some of the specs. You get a pretty decent manual with it. You get a spare prop, you get a screwdriver, you get spare screws, you get a USB charger, you get a little plastic clip, retaining clip for the micro control horn. I don't know why it's in there, but I'll probably use it. Alright, so it comes with a 1020 motor. It's geared. The prop is a GWS 5030 ABS prop, so I think you could probably use, if you wanted to, you could probably use a standard 5030 prop with a 4mm spacer, or if you could find a 4mm hub, GWS 5030 prop. Eachine says they're going to have a full line of spare parts for this plane, but it's a fairly new plane, and sometimes it takes a while for the parts to show up. Wingspan is 550mm, which I think is around 22 inches. I'll correct that if I'm wrong. It's made out of EPP foam, the most durable foam I know of so far. It uses 1.3 gram servos for the elevator and rudder, 2 gram for the servo for the ailerons. It says control distance of 200 meters, and it's a 4-channel plane, throttle, aileron, rudder, elevator. The battery is a 1S 380 milliamp hour LiPo. That's what came with mine. The dimensions on the LiPo are 40mm by 21mm by 8mm, and it weighed 11.2 grams.
I measured the battery bay to give you a good estimate of the maximum size of battery you can comfortably put in there. 42 millimeters by 22 millimeters by 9 millimeters. The flying weight on my plane, the all-up weight on my plane with the stock LiPo was 88.2 grams. It says it has control distance 200 meters. I don't know if I mentioned that yet. That's plenty far enough. Flight time, it says 15 minutes. Now, the way I fly, I probably get about 12 minutes of flight time out of it because I'm in the throttle quite a bit. If you're just cruising around, I don't think there is a doubt that you'll get 15 minutes of flight time out of it. On flight 1, I had it in the air for 8 minutes 48 seconds. I still had 3.95 volts in the cell when I landed. In flight 2, I flew for 5 minutes and 40 seconds. I think I was harder. I was in the throttle more the second flight than in the first. I had 4.05 volts still left in it. So yeah, I definitely think I'm going to be able to get 12 minutes flight time out of it. Okay, so when I was flying this out there today, I used their recommended linkage settings for the ailerons, the elevator, and the rudder. The rudder felt fine. The ailerons were okay. You know, cruising around, but there's not enough control authority with the ailerons for doing aerobatics, and now I'll do my best to correct that. But what I need to do before I take it back out is take the control horn off of the elevator servo and move the linkage to the inner hole on the control horn, because that's the only other way I have of softening the elevator up other than extending the height of that control horn. The other thing that I wanted to talk about, tip stalls. You saw the tip stall a couple times out there, and you saw that when I put it in intermediate mode, it wanted to nose up a bit. When I put it in expert mode, it really wanted to nose up quite a bit. So I think one of the reasons that I would experience a bit of a tip stall, flying as slowly as I could, and then when I was trying to do stall turns with it, it rolled pretty hard on that tip stall when I was doing stall turns. I was attempting to do stall turns with it. Okay, so I think that this plane has a tail-heavy condition. I measured the root chord of the wing. The root chord of the wing is 85 millimeters. With a stock battery in it, and I'll kind of show you here on camera, with a stock battery in it, if I put my fingers where the plane has a pretty neutral balance on it, that's 40 millimeters back of the leading edge of the wing. Now, I think that the CG is going to need to be somewhere around 30 to 34 millimeters from the leading edge of the wing. And if you put your fingers about 30-34 millimeters from the leading edge of the wing, you see what we have now. We've got a tail-heavy condition. And I think that it's tail heavy. If you look at the tail wheel, it sticks out quite a bit further than the end of the rudder. So I think what I'm going to do before I take it back out again is I'm going to remove the tail wheel, and I'm just going to put in a little loop of real thin zip tie to use as a tail skid for it, and see how much that moves the CG forward. I don't know how heavy that tail wheel is, but it's way back there. So I'm hoping that will move the CG forward a little bit, because the tail heavy condition will contribute to a tip stall. It seemed to have adequate power. In intermediate gyro mode, I was able to do loops with it no problem, and I was a little concerned about that, because when I weighed it with the stock battery in it, it was 88.2 grams, and I thought, I don't know how much thrust that's going to produce, but I doubt seriously that that's going to be any. I don't even think that's a 1-to-1 thrust to weight ratio that you're going to get out of this power system, but it was able to pull it through a loop just fine. So I think for doing basic aerobatics with it, I think it's going to be a fun plane. It's rock solid in beginner mode, and I think the reason that it was twitchy in intermediate mode and even more twitchy in expert mode, too much elevator, tail heavy condition. So I will try to get those two things corrected before I take it back out, and I will also be doing something after the review is over. I will be doing some modifications to it. One of the first modifications I'm going to do to this plane is I think I'm going to extend that aileron control surface all the way out to almost to the wingtip, because I want to be able to do rolls with it. I want to be able to do split S maneuvers and stuff like that. So I'm definitely going to be extending those, but it's going to be after the review. I want to do the review with it as stock as I possibly can without doing any major modifications to it. You know, just get it flying the way I want it to fly in intermediate and expert mode. So stay tuned for that. As soon as I have the weather and as soon as I get those two things done, I will be taking it back out for review part 2. And we'll see if we can get a better balance on it and a less twitchy elevator to do a better demonstration in intermediate and expert mode. So thank you for watching, and I will see you in the air.